Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 2. This is painting the Tannenburg unit from Victoria Miniatures. What we're going to do here is pick up where we left off. So all of this stuff that we did with these initial figures was to establish what colors we were going to use. We did a little bit of darkening on the base and just initial shading here and there. What we'll do now is we'll take some darker glazes, put those over the coats, the pants, the hair, throw some on the faces too, maybe even on the guns. So what we're going to do is those darker glazes, then we're going to start to work in the mid-tones here. Not necessarily highlights. That's probably going to be in episode 3 when we do those final details. But this is all about that, finding the darkest darks and then working through the middle. As usual, we've got our number 8 round craft brush, but I am going to start using some of the Cotmans here. I've got my Series 7, but that's kind of waiting in the wings for more of the final details. Of course, we've got our makeup sponges here, especially since we're going to be doing glazes. Probably be using these a lot. We're going to start to introduce more of the Reaper colors here in the form of, say, clear yellow, probably Maiden Flesh too. So let's see, we've got our liner paints that we're going to use here. Mostly blue liner in this case, and of course we'll continue to use the Pro Acryl paints. Again, the names are real simple. Just, sky blue, dark blue, no catchy names. Just red, umber, right? Yeah, dark umber. That's one thing I do like about those. And we also have our metal medium standing by for some of the small little metal bits, like their little hat decorations, buttons, belt buckles, that sort of thing. Although that, again, might be in the next episode. So what we're going to do is get some liner paints out on the palette, and we're going to do some of those darker glazes. So stay tuned. We've got our blue liner out on the palette and some on our brush. And what we'll do is start to do a little bit of shading here. It's, again, not talking about that black lining thing. I guess maybe you don't hear so much about that anymore. But all I'm trying to do is find some edges, and when I think it's too dark, I just throw in some more water and just reduce the intensity of it a little bit. So here is a place where I filed down a mold line, and again, always got one of these handy so I can take away some of the excess here. And that's really the deal with glazing. Remember I talked about it being a controlled wash in the last episode. That's how we're going to control it, by taking some of it away. And we got some shadow areas down here we want to make sure we hit. And we've got a trigger mechanism there. So yeah, it doesn't take much. These aren't really, they're not gigantic figures, and we only need to worry about the coats for right now. We'll get into probably the trousers next. I can see here there's just another area that didn't really get much paint at all. Another one over here. That's where we fill those kind of things in now, as opposed to, say, again, you're working on some part of this thing, the face, the trousers, whatever you're doing, all this stuff, and you go, oh darn, I completely forgot to do this area, like the red cuffs. Every once in a while that it looked like I just, for whatever reason, seemed to forget. And I get that water closer to me. There we go. And by making that more liquid, it's going to sink down into the crevices. So we need to do a little bit of that here. The collar to you, I'm sure, looks really dark, but we don't have a very well defined area there. There's bits of There's some red in there, there's a little bit of skin tone, and some areas that just have nothing, so that's a little better. And this is basically the small pointy version of the cheap craft brush. Again, brushes that are pennies on the dollar that you can use and abuse. I think for veterans of the old painting pyramid videos, they saw me using old liner brushes in the same way I use old number 8 round craft brushes for down and dirty work. So once they didn't have that pristine tip on them anymore, I would use those for what I'm doing now. But instead of having to pile up messed up liner brushes to do glazes with, I've got these guys. So that's pretty neat. You'll probably see more of these in future videos too. I'm working my way around the collar under these epaulets, just in areas where there's shadow. Then you take some water here. The male counterparts tend to have more folds and such on the back. See how I can take this paint away and leave behind my shadows and middle tones, or darkened middle tones if we want to call them that. And we just work our way through the unit here. Now in theory I could also do some other, I could darken some of these areas down too. Let's say I don't want the pistol to be quite so metallic, because in some of the other squads I noticed that the weapons have areas that are not metallic on them. And this goes to that conversation about matching things. And again, for me, it's matching a color scheme someone else established. But like I told you in episode 1, there's been plenty of times, and it's happening right now, where I have to match my own color schemes. The Army of the Dead, well, that had to kind of have a certain look to it. The Song of Ice and Fire stuff, well, I could certainly come up with all kinds of fun color schemes, but then it would be more of just that game in particular. You sort of have to go more with canon as far as your color scheme goes. I suppose you translate it back to 40K. If you're gonna have ultramarines, they're gonna need some blue, and a certain type of blue. You know what that is, and they're gonna need a certain symbol on them. It's just that's what kind of the expectation is. Now, if it's just for you and your buddies, and no one else is ever gonna see it, well, maybe that changes things a little bit. But if you're taking your armies to a store or whatever, people say, well, wait a minute, those are supposed to be ultramarines? And yeah, I think you know what I mean. Those guys aren't supposed to be white, those guys aren't supposed to be this, so yeah, choosing a color scheme for your army can always be double-edged sword. For me, it's always really fun. I know with my Tomb Kings, the greatest moment ever is when I came up with that wild, basically Zinch type color scheme for them, because I wanted to have no gold, no red. Essentially, the Tomb King's army I'd already seen 1,000 times. I said, well, why should I just repeat what's already been done? I need to do something different for me, and that's what I did. I've thought long and hard, and through watching a few actually documentaries, that's how I came on to the Zinch type color scheme with all the fluorescent colors and the wild armor that had no gold in it whatsoever. Worked out really well because I learned a whole bunch of terrain things. I learned how to paint demon marble. That's actually another video that's available to the patrons right now. So here's another collar that's going to have to be painted red, but for right now I'm just going to hit it with this dark blue glaze. So I'm going to go up here, grab a little water, carry that down. We've got, see, even here, there's like basically an area where there's not paint. I think I must have filed a mold line that I found or whatever. So, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get in there and get rid of it. You notice I don't really care that I go over that little red piping line there. No big deal. See how much I can take away with this sponge here? Let's get some dark colors on the hat. And we're 60% of the way through the unit. And I know there's a couple of figures that I'd already sort of played around with a little bit. See what I did there? Just threw a little bit of my glaze color just in this one spot. That's it, not everywhere. Here we'll do another one there. If I remember right, if I look at my sample one that I did, my color test figure, I think I did a little glowing orange diode type of deal on the las gun. That'll just be done with a little bit of the Vallejo fluorescent paint. Now this belt is also going to be a different color here, but instead of trying to paint around it, I said, the heck with it. I'll just paint over it for now. It'll be a lot easier to just paint that in after the fact than to try and deal with working around it, because it, like I said, I used to do that all the time and then wonder why things just took longer. I said, it really shouldn't have taken that long, and then I realized, well, yeah, I created an extra hour or two of work for myself that I didn't really need to do. See, look at how much of that comes off. What do we have here? We definitely need some darks down in there. See how I just sort of sharpen up that line here between the red and the blue. I can see that I also missed that line of shadow down under there before. So once again, it's why I like to work on multiple things at the same time and don't get too absorbed in just one area. It's tempting, you know. I've found myself screwing around just painting pouches. You know, I got into a roll painting pouches. Next thing you know, I've been painting pouches for 2 hours. When if I had just kind of stopped doing that and moved on to something else, I probably could have been a little more productive. And I'll go over this. Again, sharpening up those lines, and then take my sponge and remove some of that. The trousers get far less dramatic of a treatment than this, so you may not really even notice it all that much. And in some cases, I know with the color test figure, I was doing more glazes kind of after the fact. You know, I added a bunch of lights and midtones and actually went back in and toned them down. So that, you may see that too. I think, what's the question that I get? Or, not necessarily a question, but it's one of those conventional wisdom kind of things where you work from the inside out. And that does make sense. until it doesn't make sense, if that really describes anything there. Because sometimes you actually have to work the other way around. So yeah, this one definitely had, I did a little bit of the blue there, but I want to get in on this inside of this collar here, and that's where I've just really let the blue liner be very watered down. You can see I'm also covering up, again, that red piping there, because we're going to go back in and we'll lighten that up, no problem. Here we go. See, I can just go in there, wipe some of that away. We're going to be putting a little bit of shading onto our epaulets there. Let me shading all over the place on the faces. And we're kind of sticking more with the blue at first. And looks like we've mostly got inside this collar here. One more left. Sorry about that. And that's our officer here. I know they're not really referred to as officers in 40K. That's more of a bolt action thing. You have to be around that officer. It is really important when it comes to those order tests and morale tests. If you don't want your units running away or just kind of wetting their pants and just standing around doing nothing. Here we go. And he has glasses of some type, so we'll just mark that so that I don't sit there and try and paint eyeballs on him. It's another pistol that I'm just going to darken down here. Wipe some away. Go back to that later. Alright, so that's our dark blue there. Let's look at our color test figure, and sorry, you can see there's some darks down in here. It's as we compare it to one of our figures we've been working on here. I don't want so much greenish blue. I'm looking for more of a, well, reddish blue. And there's a few options that I can use. There is a blue in the creature caster, but in this case I'm going to use this. That is verdigris blue from Secret Weapon Miniatures, and it's technically one of their weathering paints, but we're not going to use it like a weathering paint. So we'll throw this out here. So you can see that's got a little bit more of a true blue type of a color to it. And here, let's pull this out a bit. You can even darken that just a touch. So this will be a little bit of a darkening color here on our pants. And if it gets to be too much, so I can water it down. And I'm just going to focus on obvious areas of shadow. And then, let's see if I've got any more of my sponges here. You know, I can take away some of that. So it's only leaving behind where I want it, where there's going to be shadow areas. So let's compare that. Let's get our... So you can see how we're starting to get some of that more true blue type color into the shadow areas. Now obviously that male character, the pants have way heavier folds in them. Way heavier folds than this. So I guess if we wanted a more direct comparison, we would just have one of these guys, and you can see he definitely has more folds on the trousers, and we are now going to pop in some shadow there. See, I'm even going to have a little pile there of more watered down shadow color. And it's gonna have more, I suppose, dramatic effect on the pants. You probably didn't see very much on the coats themselves. The coats, you may not really notice a big difference in what we're doing until it's the opposite, where we're adding the lighter colors to it. And we'll just run our way through here, like so. And again, I'm trying to get as much of this process on film as I can. You know, I realize, you know, maybe this looks a little dark here, so it is possible for me to crank up the brightness a little bit. You know, maybe we'll boost our color intensity here. And I just want to make sure that this is in focus for you. Here we go. So I had the brightness level down because at the start of the last episode, what we were looking at here was much more white. This is very white, really light, and it was getting burned out, especially when you kind of compared it to the white of the palette. So see, now we've got some shading in the pants there. I'll throw these over here. Keep going. And again, all I did was throw some water in there. You can use flow improver or whatever if you want. There's no rule against using any of that sort of stuff. I just use water nowadays. I think there's a jar of Reaper Flow Improver sitting probably a foot away from me right now. It just doesn't really occur to me to use it. And that is not to say that 3-6 months from now you don't see me using Flow Improver more often. Maybe there's a really nifty product that comes out that hasn't been out, and I'm able to work it into what I use. I suppose the other reason why I just got more used to using water is a lot of times I have to do this stuff on the road. I'm not at home. I'm at some convention doing demos or whatever, and well, that's all that's available. There's water and nothing else, because I could only take that either a minimum amount of paints, or maybe I don't even have my paints with me. So that's, I guess, another situation you could find yourself in. You know, you're either at a game store or whatever, and they have a painting area, but you don't have your paints with you, and maybe they've got just some whatever store paints there. Maybe these lessons equip you a little bit better to go, all right, they don't have what I normally use, but I can take the stuff that's here and do something with it. So again, the female type characters just don't have as many folds, but where there are folds, they tend to be, see, kind of compressed together. So we're just going to use the sponge to take some of that away, or even shading our red stripe kind of by default here along the side. Now the leg, we'll do that here, and then come back in and just wipe some of that away, and I'll leave the shading down there under that knee. What do we got here? Another one of the male characters. We'll get down in here, and so you can see not only are we darkening this down, we're tinting it. Again, another thing that tends to be property of glazing, where you can not only darken a color but shift it a little bit. So let's say we wanted, for whatever reason, the trousers to almost have more of a teal green look to them. Well, we could throw a little green over the top very transparently, and you get that subtle hint of green without having to mix a whole bunch of colors. 10% of this, 2% of that, and just endlessly layer after layer after layer. This can help you save time, because I had come up with some kind of estimation that 2 glazes is worth about 5 layers of opaque paint. And in the case of when you're tinting while glazing, you almost double that, because again, you're not just making something lighter or darker, you're also giving it a little bit of a color shift, and it makes it look like you spent hours mixing, painstakingly mixing all of these extra colors in, and doing all these layers of this and that and the other. Nope, there were no extra layers. There was a couple of glazes that tinted the color, shifted it more towards something else. In some ways, glazes can be almost more effective on, and I really hate the term, the gaming pieces, or was it tabletop? Boy, I hate that word. Really hate that word. But when you're trying to, again, get a more bang for your buck and get more results for less, doing that glazing and the tinting, you've spent less time, not doing all those painstaking layers, and you're not anticipating, you're not there to win the golden demons anyways. You want to have an army that looks really nice, that has a little extra juice to it, and maybe anybody else at the local venue. So we're on our last one here, like so. And I believe what I'm going to do is make some darker skin colors, and we'll darken down. Yeah, we'll do that, because there's about 10 minutes to go in this segment. Again, I try to keep them at a certain time. I don't want to have a 50-minute segment to try and edit in. It's harder that way, and if something were to go wrong with a segment, with a camera stops recording or something weird, then I just lose a little less of the overall deal. So let's see what we can do maybe to darken down some of the faces. So I'm going to have a few things out here. We got camo green. Throw some of that out there. We're going to throw some of that mahogany wherever that is. That is not mahogany. We also, we want our skin coat. Now we're just going to throw out that mahogany if we can find it. And if not, I'll just use something else. Yeah. So for whatever reason, not finding it, because it's over here. Here we are. Some of that. And now I know where the skin tone is. That's over here. Remember how we mixed a little bit darker skin tone? Well, here we're just looking for something that's nice and dark for, say, around the eyes and under the brims of the hats. The green is in there to keep it from becoming too... See, I was making like a little bit of a brown here. So it's a nice little shadow there. And then this is, we don't want to have 5 o'clock shadow on the female characters, so there's something that's a little almost more reddish for them. Well, let's get in with the male characters here and get some shadow around their eyes. Like that has a little greenish tint to it. Also here around the mouth and the chin. You may not be able to see everything that I'm doing here, but that's okay. Might even throw a little bit of this across where the belt is, just to mark where that's going to be. So just a little bit of shadow on the face there, and I'll start off with some of the, I think there's 6 of the male characters and 4 of the women. For whatever reason, I didn't end up with 5 and 5. I'm not quite sure how, but that's just how it happened. No big deal. You saw on the website that you can get them in your batches of 5. And where's another? The guy characters here again. We're going to dip into that greenish tone and just work here. Kind of give him some sideburns. See, and right there, I got some paint on the red, which we don't have to worry about because we're not working on that just yet. So remember, we were talking about the inside out type thing. Well, this is our modification to that. And here's our little belt. I just don't want to forget they're there. So, and you see that color, we darn near made the same brown that the pouches are already. You'll see colors like this again. And I love to take these greens and just incorporate those in skin colors and in the stuff that's normally, say, brown. So there's a whole big red stripe on his face there. That's gone. And the hand, and we got the last male character here. And see, now I can get rid of some of that red where I just had jammed it in. So there's another big blob of red there under his face. And if the green is kind of there, now we don't have to try and paint that in later. So now we'll switch out here. So we've got the 4 female type characters, and we'll just go with something that's a little more, for lack of a better term, pinkish. Go like so on the hand. And yes, I don't care. I'll just hit the belt right there. I think there's probably 1 or 2 of the male characters I forgot that on. Not a problem. I was just using the paint while I had it. And while I'm here, see open mouth, gonna grab a little of the mahogany and just throw that in there. And maybe instead of blonde here, I give this one, there's already 1 blonde here, so we're gonna switch this one and maybe make it have red hair. Like this. So again, making a little change on the fly. That's good. I'll go to the next one here. And you can see the heads are smaller, the bodies are smaller, so you have some different proportions there to help distinguish them. There's that. Yeah, we're we're cleaning things up as we also add in some shadows. And right now it doesn't look terribly dark. Say, well, what the heck? You're not really changing it that much. Well, when we get lighter colors on here, and by lighter I don't mean highlights, I mean just basically lighter, it will make a huge difference. You'll really see it. Look at that big old blob of red that's there that's now gone. Don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think that will be, yeah, I'm just gonna do some of the belts on these, and that will take care of, it takes care of adding some of the darks there. What's the next thing we want to do? Let's find one that has the epaulets there, so we're also going to just throw some quick shading on those, right? And we may throw some more shadows here on our spats and the boots. And after that, then we'll get into some of those middle tones we've been talking about. We've just got a few more of these darker shading glazes to go before we start to fool around with the midtones. And I've got some orange out here. Also got some brown lighter. Gonna take a touch of that mahogany, basically redden that up a little bit. And what we're gonna do, remember those pouches that we hit that were looking super light? I'll just throw a little shading over the top of those. We've got on the spats here, we need maybe a little shadow there. None of this is terribly earth-shattering here. It's just, we're going to make the boot here a little different, a little darker than those spats over the top, or I'm just going to call them that. So see, that all that was just to distinguish one from the other and get a little bit of a shadow under the pants there. That's about it. So I'm going to get this brown liner out of the way, and now we'll continue on with this. We may darken some other areas. I'm going to darken the hair here so I can maybe make that more of a dark reddish brown. What are we going to do here? So definitely see we can strengthen that shadow under the leg. Let's get a little more watery before we put some of that on the boot there to make that darker. Again, I'm working off of the original, color scheme that I was given. So if you wonder why some of these choices, it has to match. So that's how it goes. Now here's one where you can really see how the boot and that spat are the same color, and now all it took was this reddish brown glaze over the top. Take some away with my finger, and look at the difference we've created just with that. Now, since these have to be for photographing on a website, well, I will be going back in and spending hours after the cameras are off, just doing little tiny subtle things that will never show up on camera. That's the other nature of the beast. If it's just an army for you guys, you don't have to go to that length. The vast majority of you that are watching these, you are not doing armies on commission where they need to be photographed and everything else. So that's not something you need to spend extra time on when you could see a whole new different tutorial, say of the Night's Watch, where that's where I'm going to be working with a lot of really dark colors. It'll be the first time I've ever painted an army in dark colors, ever. And I usually don't go with dark colors on armies. Actually, not only is it going to be darker colors, but now you're talking about a snow base, so the base is going to be lighter than normal. Ironically enough, think of the Army of the Dead. The figures are lighter and the bases are darker. With that Night's Watch, it's going to be totally the opposite. So that's something I'm going to be working on. Well, going to be working. I've already got a episode or two filmed of that. Yeah, I guess I can say too that just like with the armies, where I have several armies going on, all kinds of individual miniatures, I don't just sit there and paint one thing till it's done. I don't just do one video till it's done. Sometimes I have to squeeze in an oil painting video because I need that stuff to dry. Which means I'll do the oil painting video, and then for the next few days I'll film acrylic stuff or a battle report or something else while those oils dry. Remember, the reason I'm going with the reddish brown is because on the base I even throw a little bit of green. I can actually really see it here. Now that's of course kind of in shadow, but here we go, a little more glaze there, and let's get this hair a little darker and put some more darks where the eyes are. The mouth is open, so I put a little more of that dark in there. What's going to happen here? We're going to get in here with our dark reddish brown on the boot there. Same thing here. I want to make sure I sneak in a little of that reddish brown. And here's definitely a case, again, where just one glaze like that takes some away, and we have a nice little difference there. I'm going to actually get in here, put some shadow right there. And there may be some pouches that I forgot with this darker color, so I'm going to go back in and check for pouches. Yep, sure enough, here's one. And it's, again, it's nothing complicated, just hit it, take some away. There's a pouch here. What are we going to do? I'm just going to throw our little glaze on there. Now we can go in with a sponge, take some away. We have, I'll just do this pouch now while I'm looking at it. Take some away. A little bit of a shadow there, and now on the boot. And sorry if these kind of pop on camera and then I take them away from you. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's hit that like so. I think we've got enough of a dark liner on the hair. We'll throw a little bit of that into the mouth, a little around the eyes, not too much. We are going to darken down the stock of that las gun. Some of the fingers here, so I can even start to do some of that. See, we've got some cleanup to do right there. So that's the other thing. Sometimes I'll say, well, I can clean up a little line here and there. So I see no pouches here. I'm gonna do my little bit of a shadow under here. And now for the boots, and also the, lo and behold, the guys tend to have bigger feet too, so the boots are a little larger here. And that's good enough. One last guy. Now he has a whole bunch of pouches. And we can really see that the boots because of the kneeling pose. So we'll see, we're just going to throw this over the top here. We take some of that away. Again, another set of a couple of pouches. We'll get some more. And now the boot right here. Just let that settle down into the crevices. And we need some more darks. Alright, we've got that taken care of. So remember we had the orange out here. Yeah, let's take some of the orange, throw in some of that mahogany there. It's going to make kind of a darker, yeah, a little bit of a orangey brown. Throw this on some of the epaulets here in a few places. Again, it's not so much darkening them down. I just wanted more of a orangey reddish color in the shadows. That's really the only reason why I did that. Well, that and because I want to throw a little bit of lighter colors on the skin tone here, I thought, well, I could use some of that same yellow on the skin tone. Orange yellow, I guess. So see, that's darker than that original color there. But what it's also do is it warms that up just a touch. Let's go back to the original figure. And you can see that orange right there on that epaulet? So that's the shadow color that I was after. Right here. Is that also, it helps make it stand out from that darker blue that's surrounding it, of course. Here we go. What's next? And like I said, what we'll do is we've got that skin color sitting out there. We have these other colors around that we can use to start to lighten up some of those skin tones. Here we are. And all it is, we start to separate the fingers a little bit. We start to define some cheekbones. And this one doesn't have the epaulet, so we don't have to worry about that, which means we just got a couple of more left here. Just these couple. Because see, there's actually a lot of blue in the shadows of that. Didn't want quite so much blue. See here, that's kind of just a dead color right there. And so not only did we darken it down a touch, we just livened it up a little bit. So let's move some of these back out of my way here. Let's see what we're going to do with some of these skin tones here. And there's the mahogany. So let's just throw some of this on there and we'll see what kind of difference that makes. I'll start here on the fingers because it'll be the easiest for you to see. Just want to make sure that we're in focus here. Seems that way. Actually, here's something I'm going to do. I'm going to get a little closer. There we go. Sorry about that. I think I had it backed out from a previous session. So see, even right there, that starts to look like a highlight. So I'm going to have to get used to where the camera is now. It's in a slightly different spot. Let's see, we're just going to lighten those cheekbones a bit. We're going to throw a little reflected light here under the chin. Just a little bit. Now the hand over here. Just throw a tiny bit on the neck. And again, this is a mid-tone. We're not trying to get any kind of highlights here. I think the other thing I'm going to do is boost my color saturation. So let me get a figure up here. Color intent. Yeah. Here we go. That's better. We'll increase the brightness just a touch. Go back in here. And watch how that just starts to really stand out there. But all of the dark color in between the fingers, that's already there where we need it. And just think of how much darker this is on the palette compared to what we're doing here. It doesn't look dark at all. It looks light here. And what we're going to do is we'll go back in and we're going to add some little bit of rosiness to the cheeks on the, obviously the female ones, and then on the male ones do the 5 o'clock shadow thing. So here we need some, again, some reflected light there on the chin, and maybe I water this down a bit. I can always grab a touch of that mahogany, darken it down. We need a little lighter color on the neck there. So hopefully, again, this gives you a little better notion on how to approach maybe flesh tone on a bunch of figures. When I think about it, this is probably, with the exception of maybe the Winter Soviets, this is as much human skin tone as you've seen on one of the Army Painter things. At least till now. The Night's Watch, yeah, they're wearing lots of, it's winter time, so you'll see their face and maybe their hands. So yeah, not much more skin tone than what you're seeing here. Here, we'll just gotta get this thumb and the hand over here. We need to lighten up some of these fingers, get a little more separation there. On the back of his hand. And again, not using any kind of fancy brush at this point, just all we're trying to do now is bring in some lighter tones. Not worried about painting eyes yet, or teeth, or whatever. I'm going to mark out where those are. Actually, I'm going to turn that brightness down maybe a little bit, and maybe some of the, see, look at that. See, that's down to 0 there. That's a fun little thing that I can do with this camera setup. So those times where I'm talking about contrast, where it's not a light versus dark contrast, but say a red versus green, and when I kill the color saturation, that's where, and all of a sudden, that contrast goes away. You'll see the contrast of light versus dark, but say red versus green or whatever, if they're both the same level of lightness, and you take away that color saturation there, well, it's just going to all be one solid shade. So here we're going to do the neck there. Again, looking for the lighter tone on that chin. And I know I've promised you stages where things are a little more, I don't want to use the word dainty, but the approach is a little lighter, a little less frenetic. Well, we're going to get into that now. This is where things start to, I don't want to say slow down, because we still want to keep a good pace. But this is where we get a little more deliberate, I think. That's maybe the word that I'm looking for. Here on the, see right here, the difference that can make. And oh my gosh, when I use the Maiden Flesh or whatever, you'll think this color is just dark. Because right now it looks like I'm practically putting white on here. And believe me, it is not white. Yeah, let's throw a little mahogany in there to darken that down. And now things, the eye sockets start to emerge a little bit. The mouth does. Bring that hand out a little bit. Don't have to worry so much about the neck there. And I'll just keep moving along here. The male characters, they have some really heavy lines on their face. Like right here around the eyes and stuff. That is really prominent. And now the hand here. I think I've got that pretty much where you can see it. Yeah. And what I'll do depends on how much time we have. What I may do is actually get out some of the Maiden Flesh that I was talking about and just maybe throw some quick lighter colors over the skin tones here. So, yeah, we got his chin over here. And again, I'm going to be throwing some more greenish glazes in there too. But for now, I just need to know what's going to be light, what's going to be dark. Got a couple more left. Get you here. All right. His hand again. Some more. There we go. And now our officer here. So now I know on camera when I picked him up, it just looked like his face was a big old blob of gray, and now you'll start to see the lips emerge, the nose, side of the face, a little bit of his neck, some fingers. I suppose now even on the face, I don't want to call it traditional, layering up or whatever. I think that's what it's usually referred to as. It's kind of not, because we tend to go back and forth. I'll be glazing other colors over the top of this. Some greens in some instances and a more rosy color in others. Which actually that's what I'm going to do next before I fool around with the Maiden Flesh. Alright, so good enough there. Now let's... Yep, that camel green still usable. We'll mix a little bit of that with our lighter skin tone here. And we'll drop this down. And we'll throw some in our areas here where we think there should be some little touch of that 5 o'clock shadow. It's not really darkening that, but it is hopefully, yeah, I think you can see it's a little more greenish there. But we'll be doing this on the male characters, and then I'm going to grab some red, and like I said, we'll throw a little, just ever so slight of a rosiness on the cheeks of the female characters. The guys, what I'll tend to do sometimes is throw a little red on the nose, and sometimes up near where the eyes are. That's another place I like to sometimes, because you got blood vessels there. And also with the guys, so I'll throw a little green right there. Ooh, let me bring these guys back. There we go. Yeah, sometimes I'll throw a little green there too. Kind of almost indicate like they've got some hair on them. You don't necessarily want to be painting individual hairs at this scale. So see, all of a sudden now that doesn't look quite so rough there. And because this is, I think you'll really see it here. Okay, we're going to turn him around. And see how, yeah, it's actually lightning. It looks like reflected light. Well, guess what? You are what you wear. If you're wearing a dark blue coat, well, you don't have to be a guy to almost look like you have 5 o'clock shadow when you're wearing a dark blue shirt or like a black t-shirt or something. If you're wearing a neon green t-shirt, guess what your face is going to reflect? You are what you wear. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm teaching a class with live folks, and just the first thing they do instinctively is they look and see what they're wearing. I think we've got one more. Yep, there he is. So there's our female characters. There's the last male character. Another officer type here. And what we're going to do is, we don't want to wipe out the shadows we did, but we're going to sort of augment those with a little bit of this green. Again, on the backs of the hands here. See how we got that crazy, almost looks like teeth right there, all gone. And we'll grab our, and you can see some of that there. See, there's also a little rosiness here on the knuckles. That's something we're going to add in. Actually, we'll do that here. So let's find ourselves a little touch of this brighter red here. And just like, let's see if, okay, here, let's see, I'd have to make the palette bigger. Let's do that. So we're going to make the palette bigger, we're going to move it over, and what we're trying to compare is these two colors and what happens when we, boom, take down the, oh, I can't do that on that camera. Never mind, sorry, it's a separate camera. And I'm not going to mess around with it, but it's virtually the same. As far as light and dark goes, it's virtually the same. Alright, what do we got here color intensity wise? Here, let's bring that up a touch. Alright, but rest assured it's about the same level of lightness and darkness as the green. So, what are we doing here? We're just, again, see, it's not going to darken things down. And then we're going to throw a little of that on the hands. Throw a little bit of that up by, again, by the eyes there. And a lot of this will, that's going to go away because we still have all of our light colors to add. Don't forget that. But it just separates them a little bit from all of the scraggly male faces, I guess, if you want to call it that. So there's a second one, there's another one. Hopefully that is, looks like it's about where you can see it. So see a little under there. Again, up around where the eyes are. One more to go. And what do we got over here? Yep, you can see it. And what we are now going to do is we'll grab some of the Maiden Flesh in our next segment, and we're going to add some lighter colors to the skin and sort of play off what we've got here, right? So we'll do that next. Stay tuned. We've got a little bit of Maiden Flesh out on the palette now. It's another Reaper color. I don't necessarily use it as a skin tone. I actually use it as an off-white. You're actually going to see me using the Maiden Flesh to lighten up the trouser color here. The sky blue Maiden Flesh, that is actually, you're sort of looking at a little bit of that right here. Even on the blue coat. So again, I use it as more than just a skin tone. I'm going to see how much that already brightens up the skin color from the Creature Caster Slow Fuse Gaming line. So we're going to start out with a little bit of this. And now let's see what we can pick out here. So we got her, looks like where you can see it. And this is not the lightest color we can use, but look at the effect that's going to have. Yeah, we can throw in an eye now. If there's too much on there, I can take some off. Over here, we're going to get the ear. You can see the difference that's going to make on the fingers. Let's see if I can make sure this is where you... Yeah, looks like you can see it there. So we'll get the cheekbone on the other side. The chin. Another eye. And I've still got my red out there, so while I'm here, let's get some of that. Tone that down. Just a bit along here. Get some reflected light there. We need to darken it down a touch. And get a little reflected light there. I don't want to lose completely the structure of the cheekbone there, but I definitely want to have it almost like, say, a little light to dark. Or it's lighter towards the bottom here, and it just gets a little bit darker as you get up closer toward the cheekbone there. Let's make sure we have a more of a gentle transition here. Another reason, see, look, I just nailed that epaulet there. It's another reason why we're going to work on the face now at this point, or faces. Now, I don't know if this will take up an entire segment or not. But I think I will. I'm going to carry the faces all the way through. So it might, maybe we don't get to all of the stuff. I might do just the trousers, maybe, after doing the faces. All depends on how long this part of it runs. So again, I always have some of those previous colors with me, and here's another case where we've got to make this into a transition here. So we've got a stark line, and now see, we just soften that a bit. Now we go back into here. on the knuckles, fingers here, chin, a touch on the neck. That sounds weird out of context. That sounds really weird out of context. Where are we at here that you can hopefully see that? Because believe it or not, we're already over an hour in on this video. It goes fast. Definitely goes fast. So say we're bringing out some of these features here. Now, of course, with each thing you start to lighten up, there's just, well, there's less things that need to be lightened. So it starts out looking like there's a whole lot to do, and with each pass that you do on these, you find there's just, well, there's a little less to do. And we've got to add another eye in here. Again, I've got to hold it where I can see it too. I don't necessarily like to have, or to use white per se for the, well, whites of the eye. I think, what's it? It's like a bluish white color. It's another Reaper one. I think it's called Maggot White, something like that. Sometimes I'll go with that. But you've got they're sort of in shadow from the hat. You know, from the brim of that hat. So why would those be so intensely light? You know, shadows are shadows. And that finger there. A little bit on the back of the neck there. One more of these. I'll try and do also the eye, you know, the eyeballs, the pupils and everything, your irises. Now, there's some where it's just too darn small and everything is just too close together, or it's at too weird of an angle for me to do that and for you to see it. So you may not see the eyeballs on each of these, but I normally do, especially in stuff like this, is I pick out one or two of the ones that are the easiest for you to see, the best examples, and do those. So there you have that. Again, we need a little reflected light here on this chin, but then I've got to go back in and grab some of this. Do that same thing again that we've done on the other faces. Now with the male faces, that might be more with the camo green color. Alright, let's go back in with some of the lighter tone here on the chin. A little bit more on the top side of the cheekbone. Sometimes you just say, oh, well, okay, that didn't work out so well, got to go back in. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a little bit. You know, you didn't have the best luck with the brush stroke. It happens. It's not that big a deal to fix it up. What do we got here with this guy? He's right there. And now, again, with some of these guys, I'm going to give them a little touch of redness on the nose. Don't want to look like they've been drinking too heavy. But it does. It acts as an interesting contrast to the green. So see, just a couple of brush strokes there. One here, one on the eye. completely changed what we had going on there. Maybe not as much with the reflected light. Let's see what we got. Green. Okay, good. See, we got some of this green here. Alright, let's make that where you can see it. And just like we did with that more rosy type color, look at what we're doing here. It's getting slightly, ever so slightly lighter here. Come on, a little more. Right there. So you just to do the same thing on this side over here. So see how that one little brush stroke right there kind of separated that out just a touch. Now again, the back of the neck. There. Next guy up. Right here. So he's got the spectacles there. And he's obviously also going to need a little bit of the greenish tones there. So fingers to get a little delineation on that. Same thing on this hand. We got an ear over here that needs to be a little more prominent. Now back to our greenish mix over here. Is that where you can see it? It seems to be. So again, we lighten it, but we also tint it ever so slightly more towards the green. I'm just going to get a little touch of skin color on the glasses there. We can even, we can add a little touch of blue, but remember those glasses are also in shadow. They're under the bill of that cap. Here we are. This is that same kind of facial structure that we had on the other guy. Now, like I said, I had 30 of these. And what I tried to do was try to pick faces that were a little bit different, or they were in different positions. I didn't take as many of the guys who are firing the weapons because, well, those tend to get in the way in terms of you being able to see it. So, again, like you have these, you'll be able to figure that out with basically the other tips and knowledge that you have now been armed with. I got a couple more. I think we got an off. Yeah, we'll do the officer here. Fingers. Get these knuckles here. Now, this brings up something over here. Okay, we've got the sword hilt there that's supposed to be, this bright shiny thing. If they're out highlighted by the skin tone, well, you're basically sort of killing your own metal effect. Because, like I said, you've literally outshone, out-highlighted it, whatever you want to call it. So here's some of that green. So it's not just a lighter color, but it's also, again, tinted more towards green. Here, let's go back to our other lighter skin tone there. shot here. And then when it gets too, let's take some of it off the brush. Just trying to work my way around that eye. We got another eye we have to try and paint in here. But it's literally buried under the cap, so you just won't see it. Yeah, now this guy, he's shooting, but his head is not obscured by the gun. I think I'll look around and maybe in a different segment or whatever I can show you some of those other ones where they're mostly finished. So the hope was that we would be pretty much where those are at the end of video number 2 here, but we may be slightly in back of that. That's okay. And if necessary, I can just do one more episode to get them all in. So now we're back to that green again. Hopefully be on screen. I'm going to get rid of some of it. Because again, I need a little bit of reflected light here. Same thing on this side too. We have his ear, back of his neck. One more here. And sometimes I just go in with that greenish color first. A little easier here because you can see his chin is not quite so obscured by, say, a collar or a gun or something else. So you know, a guy like this one, this is probably a really good candidate for trying to get some eyeballs in there. It's not a super complicated thing either. It's just it's a matter of placement. You know, people, they also talk about, you know, steady hand. Well, look what I'm doing here. See this little tripod that I'm building? So I've got real good handle on this. Again, just dead paint jars. Real solid grip on this. Hand is here, and both elbows are sitting up on the table. And this might help you too. So these are these little gel things here. I can't really see, it's just too big to put on camera, but they're these gel-filled, basically wrist rests. They're designed for keyboards. You know, so as you're typing away at your keyboard, your wrists are not suspended in midair. Your arms are actually resting on something. And for whatever reason, we just happen to have one of those around here, and I just got the idea of using it for painting. And boy, have I loved that ever since. I have long arms, so I had to get some really big ones, but yeah, that really helped out comfort-wise. And also, my elbows don't literally slide off the table like they had. Yeah, that wasn't too much fun. So again, the back of the neck here, where it's catching some light. The fingers here. And we'll just go one more level here. So I'm going to throw out some more of the Maiden Flesh. Like that. And as I said, I'm towards the end of the series here. I'll have to go back in and do some some really detailed refinements on some things that you just wouldn't even really see on camera. But it certainly gets you to a point where, again, you would have a really nifty looking army. So see how these faces really now they're starting to have even a little expression to them. So there we go. I'll just get more of the eye in there. So certainly way more than what we had before. He was just basically a blob. It's like a gray blob when we started this segment. And now all of these just, you see they're getting a little more, and the hands will definitely do the little, light, little rosy bits on there too. You have to judge how light you want the skin to be. Maybe you want these guys like the, what were they? The Van Diemen's World Devils. They were supposed to be clearly from a planet that has something called the Outback. They had that sort of Chindit, or not Chindit, the Anzac type of a look to them. Well, you give them a little more of a tanned flesh look, and that's what I did on those guys. They didn't have anywhere near the sort of highlight levels here, and a lot of them had beards. So I need to go back into that. Good, there's still some camo green left over here. Alright. Sometimes, the shape of the face kind of dictates where you can go with your brush. It's just kind of how it is. Alright, let's keep our Maiden Flesh going here. We're on an officer. And this is one where, like, say, on the chin and everything and the ear, I'm going to have to go back in. Like I said, and do some of those little additional refinements that just won't show up on camera because things are just in the way. And see, we're going to switch this around. Remember we were talking about doing all the green on these guys? Well, we're going to go the opposite way. And this is a good candidate because his face is so out in the open here. Remember we were talking about adding a little bit of rosiness to the nose there and the upper part of the eye. So we're going to do that here too. So just a little bit right there. And then back to our green. Again, sorry if I keep smashing into the camera here. So let's lighten this up one more time. And then one more pass back with the green. And that's not quite so dark anymore. Again, trying to make sure these are where you can see them. One more. Yeah, this just, I got to thin down this brush a little bit so I can get some of these lines in here. And then I take a touch of the red into that. Let's see if I can get down into, so there's just too much dark in there. But I also don't want to lighten it up too much. And I also need a little bit of light down in here, so we're adding that. So there was too much contrast, and it wasn't because I didn't have enough highlight stuff there. It's because I was lacking basically that middle tone. And that's what I've just kind of infused in here now. It's a little more mid-tones. Can't just go wild with the highlights because Bill of the Cap, Shadow, that whole thing we've been talking about. And this one will be a little trickier too because we've got the glasses we have to deal with. And just there's a little strange shape to the cheekbone here. Not quite sure how I should translate that or not. And let's see if I can get a little extra light onto this. And that's enough. I'm going to get some more of the Maiden Flesh out here, because we've got mostly the female characters left, and we'll need plenty of the lighter color on them. Under there. And we need another eye over here. Somehow that just got left behind. No eye shall be left behind. And finally, these last few faces here. Again, I don't want to... There's this balance between wanting to have as much, highlighting as you can. You make it as dramatic as possible, but sometimes it just gets too much. In a small area, you overpower some of your other shading. You just don't want to do that. Alright. This one's certainly... The face is definitely out there where you can see it. And we'll get that chin going. And I'm going to... Got my red sitting out here. Again, lighten up some of these areas just a touch. There's kind of an area dark there that I don't want, so we'll work on that a bit here. And we'll go back in with a little bit of the red here. Alright, and now we've got last couple of faces to do. Again, put the highlights on the knuckles there. Trying not to do the whole lipstick thing here, because, well, I mean, you could do it on yours. It's just, again, the going off of what some of the other ones that I've done in the other sets. Just not doing not doing a lot of the makeup. They're kind of makeup free. And this one here, we're going to go back into that reddish color. Some on the chin here. Let's get a little more, yeah, transition right there. Still need to get a little more light on that chin. And that will take care of that. So let's see what we can do with creating some eyes here. So do we have our, here's a even smaller brush. Let's go with some brown liner here. What I like about the liner paints is that you can thin them down, but see how they still maintain their darkness. It makes them perfect for, and don't think the name liner paint is because you're supposed to do lines with them. I really wish people wouldn't make that association, because that's not what it's all about. Let's get this. Here's what I'm going to do. Matters which way they're looking. So see how she's looking off this way a little bit. I'm going to try and get the other eye to look the same way. So she's basically kind of looking off this way a little bit. Let's find another one where you'll... not sure you'll be able to see it, but what I'm really trying to do is underneath the eye there, and then right there. Alright, so she's kind of looking straight forward at you there. This one, yeah, I think you can see one of these eyes here. Especially if I can get it on camera. Like so. Get the other one in there. So now she's looking more almost this way, just a touch. And this one, her eyes are just so close to where the brim is. Now, let's see, we got this guy here. I think you'll be able to see him. Oh, yeah, especially if I put him this way. So let's give him an eyelid. And see how his eye, now he's looking this way. It means we're going to have to do the same thing over here. So see how he's kind of looking off to the side like this. It's amazing what you can do instead of having everybody just sort of staring blankly ahead. You can have the same, yeah, here we go. This is a good little note right here. You can practically have this same head, paint it 3 different, where he's looking straight ahead or he's looking off to this side. But boy, with him looking off this way, that really gives him an interesting expression. Like he's heard something over there. He's not quite sure what's going on. Oh, that's what this is supposed to be then. Maybe it's the corner of his glasses. That's why the cheekbone seemed odd. Because it wasn't the cheekbone, it was the stem on his glasses. Okay, that makes sense now. Now here, this is really buried in that hat. Let's see if I can get some of this away. And he needs to almost be looking straight this way. So There's one. There's the other one, so he's kind of looking right this way. And I'm going to get some more dark down in the mouth. Almost give him a bit of a frown. Officer. Yeah, I'll just kind of do some work on his mouth here. And the eyes are really, really, really tucked underneath here. It's about what we can do. Give him some hair. Just a couple more guys left, and then we will move on. All right, here. And I think I'll just look and see how far we've gone on this. We're already about 90 minutes in at least. So I think what I'll actually do is do some of the, not the pouches, but the epaulets maybe. Maybe we'll play with those, and that'll be the last thing in this episode. And then we can basically tackle kind of the rest of the things. The blue and the reds for the most part. That would be what remains in our last episode. So yeah, next thing what we're going to do is just mix up some lighter yellows and stuff, put some highlights on there, and maybe work on the bills of the caps too. So yeah, those are the two things we'll try. We'll do the epaulets and work on the bills of these caps next. The last thing we're going to tackle in this video, like we're talking about, is the epaulets here. We're going to make those a little bit lighter, give us a better context for our dark blue, because we're always talking about context. I'm going to do the, right here, bills of the caps. Might even do some of the belts and pouches. A little bit there, not too much, because we're still working on this blue stuff around it. And we don't want any kind of weird disasters to happen. And we might throw some highlights down here on our spats. So this one has a little bit more. And you can see now that we've darkened things down. We got clear yellow out on the palette. Here's that same orange that we used to shift the color away from that just sort of almost greenish brown. And it's nothing terribly fancy here. I'm just going to follow that line. Like I said, this officer has a little more going on with these epaulets than just the standard ones. And of course, the female characters, the epaulets are also smaller, just their shoulders aren't quite so big. I mean, one of the officers doesn't have any epaulets at all because he's got the shoulder pads, so that's something we'll take care of with the medals later on. And I will still go one step later after this. The clear yellow, I think I mentioned earlier, and well, the people that are used to these videos, they know that one of the things I like about the clear paints is that they aren't necessarily going to cover 100%. And that's one of the biggest differences between, say, those and the creature caster slash slow fuse gaming paints. Like we said, those other paints, they are designed to just cover everything like a blanket. Now these will, and you'll see it eventually here, and I'm sure those, again, that have seen the other Army Painter series know what happens when you mix even something like this Maiden Flesh over here into the clear paints, it doesn't just lighten them, it lends them that little extra bit of opacity that they may not otherwise have. And here I'm not worried so much about the decorative rope that's hanging here, because I'm sure it's going to get hit with some of that blue. As we work on his coat, sorry about that, there is just no way. Inevitably, we'll hit it, and that's why I'm not going to fuss too much over that. And we'll just work our way from one miniature to the next. Some of these can be a little bit tricky, and what's interesting, and this is something I've just noticed for a long time, that it just seems to be easier to, like with the fingers here, these epaulets where you're trying to get the individual little fringes going on these, it's actually easier to go back with something that's a little bit darker and separate those out than it is with the lighter colors to pick out each individual strand and essentially highlight those. It sounds weird. I just think that lighter colors, for whatever reason, that's probably because they have more white in them maybe, but they just tend to be thicker on your brush. And I think you've seen some examples already of how the brown liner behaves and the blue liner. They're real intense colors, got a lot of darkness to them, and they cover really nicely, but you can get them just in the tiniest of little spaces. The lighter colors, well, you try and thin them down like I'm doing right here to get them into those small spots, and it looks like you're trying to hit them with a paint roller by comparison. And you're using the same brush, no difference in the brush. It's just, for whatever reason, it's not quite as extreme as, say, the fluorescent paints, or even that metal medium that you saw me use earlier in the episode, where it looks like a little ball of, I don't know, glue or whatever on the end of the brush. I don't really know exactly what caused it. That's just my assumption that maybe there is a little more white that goes into making these pigments, and that just tends to make it a little bit thicker, and you just can't work so thin with it. I suppose it's another reason why glazes are my go-to thing. I really rely on the glazing for a whole bunch of different reasons. It's one of the ones I don't really think about all the time. I guess we all have that. Sometimes there's things we do in our painting, just, I don't know if they're habits necessarily, but stuff that we do just instinctively. We don't even think about it until sometimes you catch yourself doing it. For me, because I do so much teaching, and you're always always in explanation mode. You're almost always in teaching mode, so I guess you tend to analyze what you're doing more, or catch yourself doing something. I never even knew I was doing that. I guess if someone else was to say, hey, did you realize that you almost always do this, in this instance or whatever, when you're doing this color or doing this type of a technique. Nah, I'll never forget way back in the old Academy of Art days. I mean, we're talking a long time ago. At some point, we had watched our watercolor instructor do so many demos that we just started to notice that he worked in essentially a circular pattern around the painting. He'd start essentially in the upper left-hand corner and work his way over to the right upper-hand corner and down to the right lower corner, and he would just work around and around in these sort of circular patterns. And I think one of us even asked him about it. And this is a person who had been painting for 50 years, and he had never noticed because, well, he wasn't really watching himself. It was just, we happened to be watching them, and I said, wait a minute. And someone brought it up, and then a couple of us watched, and we all said the same thing. I said, yep, sure enough, he's working in circles. Who knows, maybe that's why one of the things that stuck in my mind, and the reason why I never just work on one part of the miniature. I circulate around the figure. I don't let myself get locked into doing just one thing. Like I was talking about the pouches, might have been in the first episode, I think, or maybe it was this one, where all of a sudden I catch myself and have spent 20 minutes putting all these elaborate colors on one tiny little pouch. And I said, well, okay, I didn't really need to get sucked into one little stupid pouch. If I just kept moving around, like I am here, from one figure to the next, it was a really nifty looking pouch, for sure, but did one pouch really need 20 minutes on it? And that starts to, I always circle you back to that currency of time. Do you really want to spend that much time on something so insignificant that, if you remember when I said, I think each of these has about 3 pouches on them, and when we actually looked at the figures, half of them didn't even have pouches. So yeah, when it's something that insignificant that I can't even remember that half the figures don't have them, maybe that's not something I should spend that much time on. You know, these are, like I said before, for photography, so I kind of have to spend that much time, but you're doing these, they're for your army. And I think I'm 99.9999% sure you don't want to spend 30 minutes painting a pouch. Definitely not. So I just threw in a little touch of that Maiden Flesh there into the yellow. Let's see if we can get one last little bright highlight on these epaulets here. Then I'm going to look at the elapsed time here. Yeah, maybe we have time to fool around with a few other things. But even this, see, look at that. How much lighter that makes it. And what's the question I always ask when we start to get bright colors? Have you seen any white on the palette yet? Not at all. You're almost 2 episodes through this whole process. Nary a bottle of white to be seen anywhere. With good reason, because we haven't even put our midtones yet on the coat, on the pants. I haven't done any highlighting of the rocks yet. So there's nothing on these that should be seeing white paint. Always save those super bright highlights for the end, because those are your final little touches. Because once you've gone all the way to white, that's it. You're at the end of the scale. You can't get any lighter. And now you've effectively boxed yourself in. I don't think you want to do that either. So it's, I don't know, if I have rules, which I really don't like to toss that term around. At the academy that I just told you about there, they were a little more firm about enforcing some of those rules, usually in the form of like ridicule and embarrassment. So, but then I'm not there to ridicule and embarrass you, unless you happen to be painting wherever I am. Then I can. Even, remember, we were doing the whites, and normally I might actually take a small, tiny bit of white to put those into the eyes to really give them an extra little sparkle, and had to stop myself when I was looking, boy, why am I having such a hard time seeing these eyes? They seem dark. Well, yeah, there was the shadow cast by the bill of the hat. And if it was effectively casting a real-life shadow, well, now it's casting that imaginary shadow for sure onto their eyes. So yeah, you don't want the whites of their eyes when they're in the shadow of a bill of a cap. So what I'm going to do is go through these, and I'm going to mix that. I don't know if you can see the brown liner on the palette, but I'll be mixing the brown liner and that Maiden Flesh color, which really is just, it's my warm off-white. That's what we always call it. That's going to be an interesting, it's a fun mix because it's sort of like a brownish gray. That's what I love about those liner paints, when you do mix something that's lighter with them, especially like with the brown liner, you mix maybe some kind of seafoam green with it, and you get this really wild bluish green gray. You go the opposite way. I've even mixed pink with it, and you sort of get a grayed flesh tone. There's other liner paints. One that I know I used it a lot on my early war German vehicles was the gray liner. That one's really fun because it has, it's probably, ironically, one of the more reddish of the liners. You do have red and green liner. In my last army painting series, at least to this date so far, I was doing a lot of red and green liner together on the Army of the Dead for some of my initial darker glazes on the armor. And for those of you that didn't see that, well, what it did was, depending on how much green there was in the mix or how much red there was in the mix, whenever a lighter color hit it, it just gave it a different tint. So here, yeah, that's on the palette. I know it sort of just looks on the darker side there, but look at this. This can even be sometimes a neat when you flesh tone shading color here, because it is somewhat gray. And let's start off here. So this, you won't notice the first couple of strokes very much. This is really more of, we're sort of leveling things out here a bit. Because remember, we had thrown that little bit of just a little hint of a glaze with the brown liner over the bills of these hats in that very early stage. Let's make sure you can see this. There we go. And we'll just go progressively lighter with more layers of that Maiden Flesh mixed in. It also keeps that color more in tune with, well, guess what? The skin tones. So now you don't have something that's too jarring because you already have that red, this red band here around the caps, a la NKVD. So I think this is another instance where the eye can just, the eye needs a place to rest. Sometimes you can't just constantly assault the eyeball with visual frenzy. Sometimes it needs to find a place to chill. And now we can start to work in a little more of the Maiden Flesh. And again, this is just a nifty, it's a neat gray. Sometimes I kind of forget that it's there. That happens to me. Don't know if it happens to you. I'll come up with color combos that I really like. You know, this green with this pink or whatever. Yeah, I used to use pink and seafoam green. I don't even remember what the heck the names of those colors were, but I use them all the time, especially on metals, of course, because the pink and green would make a nifty gray. So here, let's just screw around with this on on the face here. Ah, see, I'm going to use that right here on where his sideburns are. So now that grays that down, it gives it a little bit of darkness and ties it in with his hair, with the cap. Actually, this would make a good hair color too, especially on the grizzled veteran, so to speak. Speaking of which, yeah, we'll just throw some of that here, like so. And ultimately, I think there's just a little bit of a edge highlight that happens on the bill of the cap. So I'll bring out the one finished guy that we have, and we can double check that just to make sure. Now, normally with the Army Painter series, there's, like I said, the first episode is basing. Well, we weren't going to be doing that here for obvious reasons. It's just sand and gravel. I think you know how to do that. You don't need me to tell you how to do that. But the second episode is always a color test figure. And because it's a project for, well, work, I just didn't have the time to separate that out. You know, the usual process of making a color test figure. He just kind of magically appeared. But when I do the Lord of the Rings, like when I do the Rohan series next, and when I do the Night's Watch and Free Folk for Song, Ice, and Fire, all of those are going to have a color test figure episode. That one is really important because essentially that's what tells me, all right, how long is it really going to take to paint this figure, that figure, this effect, or that effect. And that's where your process of elimination usually happens, is on that color test figure. You say, oof, okay, I really like that effect, but it took me 15 minutes on the color test figure. Now, granted, you do it several more times, it might take you only 12 minutes, 10 minutes. But in the case of these, there's 30 of these. You're only seeing 1/3 of them. So anything, now, again, this is if I can choose. You know, if there's things that I can simplify on these and eliminate the need to do that 30 times, even if it's just 5 minutes. 30 times 5 minutes is not chump change. So if you can find yourself a little bit of time savings without sacrificing too much appearance, that's generally, you figure that out in your color test miniature stage, because you haven't gotten the muscle memory of that color scheme yet. It's still pretty raw. You're still trying to assess, okay, how do I need to approach this army here? And it happens to me, and I think everybody I've asked, something similar happens to them. Generally, by the time you've painted the last figure in the army, you know exactly how you should paint it. Unfortunately, you're done. So, because your army's finished. And congratulations, you have successfully learned everything you know of how to paint the army you are now done with. Just mix in a little more of the Maiden Flesh. This is not that final highlight. We're getting there though. We're getting pretty close. You can see every so often. I'm going to take my finger and maybe wipe some away if I need to. There we go on this guy. Like so. And I think what's interesting about these, this is again not the normal format for the army painting videos, I almost get to talk more about the strategy of how to approach an army. Probably because this one is not like the other standard ones. And it's just, I don't know, it makes me think of more of these ways that it's a little bit different. And then translating that to you, how it's different. So here we are just taking some of this lighter color here, putting it on that pouch. And like I said, remember before about the brown liner, it's easier to, for whatever reason, to actually get darker lines down inside crevices and such. That's what we're going to do with these. I'll just take either brown liner, blue liner, maybe even a little brown liner mixed with a red liner. I think I know on one of my armies it was the French bolt action figures. Oh my gosh, they had quite literally packs on top of packs. No wonder these guys couldn't move around. And just to try and get some variation and just a sea of brown on top of a sea of brownish green, I think that's where I used that little trick of the brown and red liner mixed together for some of those deepest shadows. So it helped make those stand out. As usual, it just, to the eye, it registered as dark brown. But when you really looked up close and really thought about it, it was more than that. It was that extra bit of contrast. Just like as I do this stuff here down by the base, remember early on I can even see the green here. Remember that was the whole idea of that little subtle bit of green that would create some hidden contrast to that little bit of darker red on the base. So we're just about there to that final pink. Now it's not really pink. The Maiden Flesh is too orange. It's got too much orange in it to be considered a pink. There we go. And some of these, the bill is a little more defined on some. Like a couple of these hats right here. It's really easy to see where that line is. And actually, I think the female characters, I'm not sure they even have that line. Once again, that's where a color test figure really helps you out. If I were doing these for myself, I probably would have actually gone 2 color test figures. I would have done 1 female and 1 male. Remember we were talking about using this to shade the flesh tone? I'm going to do that right here. So let's move this down. And we are just going to, so we're really going to darken this down. You just, for whatever reason, maybe because I want to have some kind of darker backdrop to his glasses, literally going to almost give him what looks like a beard. And all that is, that's your brown liner and the Maiden Flesh together. And let's go with some Maiden Flesh and just a little touch of that brown liner. And now I'll just pop a little bit of highlight on this here, right on the edge of that bill. Here we go. I'm going to grab a little more of the Maiden Flesh, lighten that up, and it's just on the end of the cap there. I'll just run right through this one by one. So as usual, as we conclude here, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I hope that some of this can be translated directly to what you're doing. Some of it you may have to adapt. And I said, well, I can't quite do all of that. Maybe I don't have those brushes, or I'm not as comfortable working with the large brushes. But that idea of working quickly or all around the miniature, that's something you can do. That's not an equipment related thing. So thanks again for watching. So on the final episode, guess what we're going to do? We're really going to focus on the dark blue, the reds, and the pants. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on episode 3.